Wow, I can't believe it has been over a year since my last address to you. I want to thank Jeff Lyon and the Chamber for hosting the State of the City address this year at the Community Center to allow for greater social distancing and safety for everyone. Did anyone here today have any idea what the term social distancing meant 1 year ago? I certainly didn't. I think it is safe to say that we have all witnessed and experienced things this past year which none of us could have imagined just 1 year ago. And just when the effects of Harvey on our community were waning and becoming a somewhat distant memory, along comes COVID-19 to challenge us once again. It has challenged us for sure, but like Harvey, it will not defeat or deter us. It is incumbent upon all of us to come together as never before and get our community back on track as the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic subside with each passing day until we have an effective vaccine to end its horrific scourge. So what is the state of our city, you might ask? I can tell you that we have been socked in the gut pretty hard by this pandemic, but I can also tell you that we're going to be okay. I say that because all in all, we were in pretty good financial health before being struck by COVID-19. Gilbert Reyna, our financial director for many years, had already anticipated a downturn in sales tax revenues anyway, before anyone even thought of a pandemic. And therefore, our actual revenue from sales tax will end up within 5% of expected revenues, which is much better than in most municipalities in Texas and very manageable for us. We also owe a shout out to City Manager Jesus Garza and staff, who on top of dealing quite effectively with the day-to-day challenges presented by the pandemic, managed to put together a solid budget leading into 2021, which still gets a lot accomplished while holding our tax rate the same as last year. Citizens will see approximately $23.6 million in street and utility projects, in addition to TxDOT funded improvements underway on Navarro and coming to US 59 in the near future. This budget also includes new police positions and pay raises for some of our first responders in pay categories identified by a citywide compensation study initiated this past year by Mr. Garza. These first responders' pay raises are hopefully a good beginning in working toward targeted pay raises throughout the organization, as identified in the compensation study to be lagging behind the marketplace when compared to other municipalities. A city's employees are no different than the employees of a successful business. They are the organization's most valuable asset. To illustrate the importance of first responders and the departments they work within, their budgets, along with that of our municipal court, represent 59% or $29.92 million of our entire general fund budget. So as you can see, no one is defunding the safety of our citizens. I also attribute much of the success this past year under very trying circumstances, as well as my optimism for the future, to the hard work and vision of my fellow council members. As I mentioned last year, I had hoped to facilitate more discussion and debate on items coming before council, encouraging members to speak their minds and never shying away from matters requiring tough decisions and decisions that aren't always unanimous. In directing the meetings, I hope I have accomplished this. I think we have been effective in our deliberations and decisions because we not only respect one another, but more importantly, I think we have come to trust one another. And for this, I am grateful and say thank you from the bottom of my heart to my fellow council members. Shortly after my address last year, council, with guidance from Mr. Garza, committed to work sessions in and outside of council meetings to revisit and prioritize goals and objectives laid out in the 2035 plan, and then concurrently develop the financial plan necessary to begin serious implementation of the plan. We began this process, but have somewhat let it slip due to the pandemic, but I hope we can get it re-engaged soon. To aid in our analysis of streets, which comprise the largest part of our present capital improvement plan, a more forensic-based study of existing streets was commissioned. This study will most likely lead to a reprioritization of the street work and better analysis of the cost involved, simply because we will know more about the present condition of our streets, including not just the surface, but the underlying base as well. Additional studies have been or will be commissioned in the coming year, such as a downtown master plan, a parks and recreation master plan, a thoroughfare master plan, and a drainage master plan, all of which will provide council with up-to-date information we will need to guide us in wise and cost-effective planning and decisions relative to implementation of the 2035 plan moving forward. Another carryover from my address last year was cleaning up our city. To that end, Mr. Garza reorganized the efforts moving cleaning and beautification work from primarily parks and recreation to the Community Appearance Division of the Environmental Services. We have seen improvements in right-of-way appearances, new landscaping around our monument signs, which welcome folks to Victoria and other key areas of the city recently. Environmental Services partnered with the Public Works and did a major cleanup and beautification project at the water plant located at Airline in Ben Jordan. More beautification is on the way. While driving my wife to physical therapy at Citizens Healthplex back in May after knee replacement surgery, I couldn't help but notice how awful our overpass structures look, with mildew growth and dirt all over them. After dropping Kay off, I called my friend, County Commissioner Danny Garcia, to see if he had the number of our TxDOT Yoakum District Engineer, Paul Reitz. Danny had introduced me earlier to Mr. Reitz when he set up a lunch meeting with Judge Zeller and myself to discuss the status of I-69 projects within Victoria County. Not only did Mr. Reitz commit to seeing what he could do, he also, more importantly, told us about state grants that are available for right-of-way beautification as well. I am pleased to share with you today that TxDOT will assist and guide the city, and we hope to have our overpass structures cleaned by the end of the year. And I would only hope that our newly hired grants administrator will begin pursuit of those state beautification grants I mentioned earlier as well. Sometimes all that it takes to get something done is simply to ask and have a good friend who is willing to help. Other quality of life enhancements slated this year, in addition to basically cleaning this place up, will include the construction of new soccer fields along the Red River entrance to Riverside Park, as well as a new splash pad and rebuilding of the duck pond within the park. Since last year, the Main Street program is now run through the city with a city employed director and 13-member board, of which 2 are city council members. Expect to see movement and improvement downtown, especially when the downtown master plan is completed. The Parks and Recreation Commission will also become re-energized in the coming year while engaging in the process of a new master planning effort. You must be asking yourself, how can the mayor speak this long without speaking more about the COVID-19 pandemic and how bad its aftermath is going to be? We all know that we will be challenged with the economic effects visited upon us by this pandemic. But guess what? We won't be alone in dealing with the effects. The effects will be felt nationwide in various degrees of distress. But at the end of the day, it will affect us in ways based upon how we choose to let it affect us. It will pose us various types of problems for God knows how long. But these problems must be met head on and solved to the best of our abilities for the future of this community. We can't simply cower in the corner whining about how bad it is and proclaiming that we just don't know what to do. Just as life is filled with joy, it is also filled with problems. It is how one chooses to deal with problems that determines the amount of success and, yes, joy one will experience in life. I don't think I was elected by the people of Victoria to complain about how bad things are and offer excuse after excuse as to why we can't do anything until COVID-19 goes away. I was elected to tackle tough issues and help find solutions to the problems holding this city back. And I'm convinced that we have all of the needed players in place. Our very capable city manager, Jesus Garza, his assistant city managers, his department heads, our city attorney, and all of our city employees. as well as a solid and dedicated city council members, all of whom are poised to take on the problems ahead of us and solve them to the best of our ability. We must keep planning, fixing things, and looking to the future beyond this pandemic, so that when this thing does finally go away, we will be prepared to move forward faster and farther in our recovery than other communities who chose to just sit this one out. I can already tell you one of the good things that has come out of this pandemic, that is even a stronger relationship between the city and the county, and more specifically between Judge Zeller and me. When you spend the better part of 2 months in the basement of the Emergency Operations Center with someone who, like yourself, has drawn the black bean, so to speak, in having to make final decisions which may have a profound effect on people's lives and livelihoods, it means a lot to have a counterpart with whom you can confide in and have very frank discussions with before making those tough decisions. Even though I'm nearly twice the age of Judge Zeller, he brought Harvey experience and wisdom to the table that helped me greatly. At the end of the day, and for the most part, it was we who made the decisions, and for that I am grateful. Thank you for your friendship, Ben. And by the way, as COVID-19 has wound down somewhat, the judge and I continue to visit, have lunch, and talk about ways we can work together and bring others to the table in cooperative ways to get more accomplished for both the city and the county. City and county cooperation is a great segue into my next subject, economic development. As I mentioned last year, we must get serious about economic development on all fronts. We must attract vibrant retail establishments to our community to increase sales tax revenues, but more importantly, we must bring in business and industry with large capital investments, which will ultimately lead to significant expansion of our property tax base. Sales tax tends to be too volatile a revenue to rely on heavily, especially for long-term budget needs. A football analogy would be to equate sales tax with a passing game and property tax with a running game. History tells us that most championship teams win the big one with a great running game. With regard to sales tax, I've had conversations with both Representative Jeannie Morrison and Senator Lois Colcourse, asking them to please take action to ensure that Victoria receives sales tax from online sales which originate in Victoria. These taxes now go to the community in which these online companies have a distribution center. We know that a strong property tax base is much more stable and sustainable over time for long-term budget needs. But the problem is that our property tax base has only increased recently about 1 to 1.5% net per year, which is not adequate to produce revenues significant enough to keep up with our ever-increasing capital improvement and infrastructure maintenance needs. Another disturbing pattern which we have seen emerge is a decrease in commercial property appraisals, while at the same time seeing an increase in residential property appraisals. This just doesn't make sense, but it's something that Judge Zeller and I are jointly looking into to determine if there's a local fix to the problem or will legislative action be necessary to correct possible loopholes in rules or regulations by which commercial properties are appraised. During this past year, a lot of work has been done in restructuring the Victoria Sales Tax Development Corporation in an effort for it to become the leader and driver of economic development for the city as it pertains to the expenditure of the half-cent sales tax that the legislature envisioned when it allowed municipalities to create these development corporations around 30 years ago. Since Bill Blanchard was appointed to the VSTDC and subsequently voted its president, along with placement of several more new members, the corporation has done much work in developing a detailed plan of work, breaking down economic development into various categories which it can fund, and has also developed a budget that reflects implementation of this plan of work. One of the priorities of the corporation, assuming its budget is approved by City Council, will be to help fund a portion of an economic development study at the airport, not to be confused with recent airport master plans, which were more about the airport infrastructure and operations and not so much about development of airport property outside the fenced, secured area of the airport. The airport commissioners and airport manager in the process of putting together an RFQ to select a firm to conduct this study. The VSTDC will also embark on funding and overseeing the creation of an overall economic development strategic plan for Victoria. This has not been done for almost 20 years. The purpose of these studies and strategic plans are to identify industries and businesses that we want to target and recruit for Victoria. This will be an intentional process, quite different than simply proclaiming we are open for business and hoping someone gives us a look. Since all of this restructuring of the VSTDC began, a renewed commitment to serious economic development has emerged all across Victoria County. I'm happy to reveal that over the next few months, you will see the city, VSTDC, the county, the airport commission, the port commission, all coming together to discuss what we can do to further economic development for all of us, and hopefully the region as well. The intent will be to work together, leverage resources, support one another to the extent we can, perhaps monetarily, and sometimes not. I have dubbed this alliance the Big Five, since these entities are the ones who have either the resources or can offer the incentives necessary to attract industries or businesses to our region. The City of Victoria will possibly be bringing on a Director of Economic Development, and as part of many duties under the City Manager, the Director will be available to coordinate the city's evolving, multifaceted economic development efforts beyond primary jobs. The Victoria Economic Development Corporation, or VEDC, will remain available as always to continue its primary job efforts. Other players such as UHV with its regional efforts, as well as Victoria College with its workforce development, will hopefully become key partners in this overall all-out effort to promote economic development. I can promise you that this long-awaited coordinated assault on impediments to economic growth and development in our community and region is needed now more than ever, especially given the realities of a post-COVID-19 economy. We must strive to make positive things happen to us as opposed to just sitting back and accepting the negative things that will surely happen in an atmosphere of inaction or lack of effort. I'm now going to really revert back to my message last year about the importance of coming together as a complete community in bringing the South Side back to the fold, both in revitalization and inclusion in all of the efforts I've spoken about today. The strain of COVID-19 plus the emergence of racial tensions in our nation cannot be allowed to pull us apart as a community. All communities have struggled with these issues to one degree or another in their history, and Victoria is no different. I don't really know what happened for sure in Victoria before my lifetime began in 1950 because I didn't live it. I do know that for the moment in time, beginning in the late 1950s when Victoria College desegregated and our school district shortly followed suit in the early 1960s, that in school at least, we found ourselves all together at Victoria High School, which I attended from 1964 through 1968. I had both black and Hispanic classmates as well as teachers, many of whom I remember to this day. One of my best teachers was Mr. Johnson, a black man, who taught an advanced math class my junior year. I and several of my classmates talked about him at our 50th reunion 2 years ago. I remember going home after school and watching on TV the events going on in our nation at that time, events not unlike what we are witnessing now in our nation. I wondered while watching black people having dogs sicked on them and water hoses being used to knock them down, what was wrong with the people doing those things to them? I wondered that because I had friends and teachers who I knew who just so happened to be black. So there we were, whites, blacks, Hispanics, and probably others who were all together, at least for that moment in time. During my senior year in 1968, Stroman High School opened across town on the south side, and after my graduation, I can't tell you what happened. People were still all together at both high schools, but from different parts of town. Another person in the room today shared this experience with me. That person is Representative Jeannie Morrison. Jeannie and I have had many discussions in the last few years about how special those times were. I know things have never been perfect in race relations, but I also know that things have been worse. And I also know that things can be better. I am here today to tell you that things can only get better between people when they take the time to talk and get to know one another, not in a cursory way, but with true sincerity. Since the peaceful march in Victoria and other events, I, along with Jeannie, approached Dr. Robert Glenn, president of UHV, with the notion that perhaps the university could facilitate some forums or other settings where sincere discussion could take place in our community, and where people of any race or ethnicity could feel safe and free to share their stories and experience with racism on a personal level with those of us like me who have possibly witnessed but have never experienced such things. I can tell you that I do have friends of color who have shared their stories with me, and they were not pleasant. I, along with Jeannie, will actually be meeting with members of UHV's Diversity and Race Task Force to explore where my idea might lead. My dream of a complete and inclusive Victoria, where we all learn to value one another's differences and share the richness of our many cultures, can never take place until we take the time to get to know one another. As I have said before, and I will say again, we can never become a great city until all of us can sit at and are welcome at the table. Now, in closing, I have probably already said more than many of you wanted to hear today, but I want to leave you with the following. These are excerpts from a proclamation I presented at a recent council meeting declaring September as Hunger Action Month. In Texas, 14% of people struggle with hunger. 1 in every 4 children in Victoria County do not know where their next meal will come from. The Food Bank of the Golden Crescent has distributed more than 5 million pounds of food to people in 11 counties this year through its network of food pantries, soup kitchens, shelters, and other community organizations. And although not part of my proclamation, our own Christ Kitchen is now serving over 600 meals a day, up substantially over this time last year. Do you now understand why I'm so passionate and determined to see all the great things taking place in our community to succeed, especially in the realm of economic development? Because until we succeed in all of that, we can never take care of this. God bless you, our great city, and this nation. And thank you all for allowing me to address you, the City of Victoria.